Hey everyone, I'm going to be reading from Zero Day today. I'm going to be reading chapters 33 and 34. Chapter 33. McQueen sat at his desk. It was after midnight, but the retired general wasn't going anywhere. Not until he'd figured out what these jerks were playing at. Today, they'd flown an unmanned drone over the White House fence and onto the South Lawn. McQueen figured that they would be dancing in the streets after pulling off that stunt, especially since the drone had crash landed right next to the president's daughter. But instead of sending out the usual after the fact missives to the press, Cerberus had suddenly gone dead silent. It didn't make sense. Of course, President Webster and his close advisors were already declaring victory amongst themselves, convinced that they had the hacktivists on the run. The boy in custody was giving up names fast and furious. FBI agents were already getting warrants for more arrests, and the forensics lab was dismantling the kid's computer, extracting all the data from the hard drive. But the whole thing made McQueen suspicious. It was too neat, wrapped up like a Christmas present with a pretty red bow on top, and there was no way that the kid the FBI had downtown was Dante's, nor was he likely to know his identity. And nothing McQueen had ever observed about Cerberus or its elusive leader had indicated that the next move would be to just go away. McQueen went back to his files, once again opening the emails and texts Cerberus had sent to the media after the fundraiser, Metro, and Beltway attacks. He lined them all up side to side and began the long process of tracing their original IP addresses. Again, just like before, they pinged all over the globe, leading McQueen nowhere. Except, hold on. He squinted at the screen and rubbed his eyes. A pattern was emerging. Breathless, he traced another email. Bingo. McQueen smiled to himself. Maybe they weren't so careful after all. Maybe they'd just gotten a little too cocky and had finally left a trail that would lead McQueen right to their front door. Chapter 34. Michael had to grab the laptop to keep it from sliding off the table as the Gulfstream G650 banked left, beginning its final descent. Outside his window, the stone and marble monuments of the most powerful city in the world grew closer. The plane turned, running parallel with the Potomac River below. The cabin smelled like coffee, and Michael felt someone's hot breath on his neck. "Any updates?" his father asked, leaning over Michael's shoulder. "No," Michael said. "Are you certain?" "Yes, father," Michael said, bristling at the words. He was tired of always being second-guessed. Of course he was certain. He wasn't stupid. But it had been 3 days since her last communication. Michael was getting nervous. If something had happened, if something had gone wrong, she wasn't here, but he was. Michael carefully weighed his next words. "Do you think that she's been compromised?" he said. "Could that guy actually have told them something useful?" The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Please take your seats, fasten your seat belts, and prepare for landing." Michael's father stood up straight and walked to the leather seat opposite his son. He sat, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose, and leaned back, thinking. Michael and his father were the only two passengers on this private jet, which had spent the night hurtling across the Atlantic. Their breakfast dishes, half-eaten croissants, and empty coffee cups were still scattered across the table. No one would come by to clean them up until after they landed and deplaned. Michael's father didn't like to travel with more than the bare minimum for a crew, which generally meant just a pilot, co-pilot, and flight attendant if necessary. The more outsiders you let into your circle, the harder they were to control. Michael's father was very careful about who he gave access to within the top levels of Cerberus. It was important not to place trust in the wrong people, especially now. Michael was used to it, though. The paranoia, the precautions. The world was a dangerous place, and this plane was their second home. Maybe their first, really. His father had associates all over the globe, most of whom, like Michael's dad, preferred to keep their meetings private. "No," his father finally said. "The busboy doesn't know anything. I'm certain of that." And forensics won't find anything on his computer either. I made sure. Hopefully your sister is just being careful. We're reaching the final stages and we have a lot at stake here. I don't think I need to remind you of that. The tattoo on Michael's back throbbed like a phantom limb. 3 heads growling at him at once, mouths open, fangs bared. No, you don't. Michael began to type. The screen in front of him changed. A string of messages from their members. Father had always handled communication with the rest of the organization, but he turned more of it over to Michael in the last few weeks, especially as their attacks on DC had escalated. Michael read, the color draining from his face. We have a problem, he said, shakily spinning the computer around. His father's expression hardened. She should have told us, he said flatly. So what do we do? Michael asked. The plane hit the runway with a jolt and slowed to a stop. Outside the window, Michael could see the Washington Monument and Jefferson Memorial silhouetted against the pale blue early morning sky. His father turned and watched the scene outside for a moment. When he shifted his gaze back to Michael, his face was cold. We fix it, his father said.